Hello, my name is Brant, B-R-A-N-T, Hunt, H-U-N-T. Today, my channel is simply called Discerning What is True. The book I've been reading from is called Psychology and Kabbalah. This is chapter 35 called Crisis. So thank you for being here. So we're going to read this particular chapter today. So again, like I said, chapter 35, Crisis. Encounter with neurosis and even psychosis is not uncommon. Most people know someone under strain who has been unable to cope. Everyone, if the truth is be known, has had personal experience of a crisis at some point. Indeed, to be born is to enter a situation in which the individual is periodically faced with change and adjustment. This is one of the chief characteristics of life. Why, one may ask, do these crises occur? That's a good question. That is a good question, for sure, for all of us. From the point of view of Kabbalah, they are seen as opportunities for development in the process of evolution. As the divine atom of consciousness, that's ATOM, atom, in each person learns to expand in its experience and yet remain contained within limits of balance. Here's the gradual spiral upward as an individual shifts from right to left columns in a ascent of self-realization. Seeing psychologically, that is, crisis check growth and ease limitation as the person moves through the progression of expansion and consolidation in the process of becoming a full and whole individual. Example of crisis and its function is the arrival of a new baby into a family of three. Suddenly, the pattern that has been perhaps well established between the firstborn and the parents is disturbed. Wow, that's an interesting concept because that's true of me. There is a picture. I have a picture here of me, which is now 1 year old and basically a little over a year old, basically a year and a day old, I should say, with my brother on the other side of the bed. And I'm looking, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? I mean, I'm like, what is that? Okay, so that's my brother, you see. And so this means that I'm no longer going to get my way. I don't know if that means what it is, but it's just a picture, a classic picture. Is like brought the stranger into. I thought, it's kind of like it's like I thought I had this. I thought I had it made here. It looks that way. I'm not saying I did, but I'm just saying it looks that way. So anyway, so now you have. Anyway, suddenly the pattern that has been perhaps well established. Maybe I've gone on apart because this is arrival of a new baby in a family of three. So there was three kids. It was a husband and wife, mom and dad, and then there was another child. And suddenly another one comes along, and it's like, okay, what's going on? So the elder child's sense of being the focus of love is threatened. Yeah, that's true, very much so. As the younger initially takes precedence. The security taken for granted is jeopardized, and a instinctive rising up of the id, nefesh, generates jealousy of considerable power. The parents may understand the situation and go to great lengths to reassure the child that their love is constant. But the animal soul, which is fear that the new baby is going to thwart its needs, will exert enormous pressure from the elder child's psyche. In most cases, the crisis is dealt with by the ego, which when it's realized that it would lose out of any hostile action were taken. This is the act of coming to terms with reality as the ego holds back a considerable feeling of hostility. However, although this impulse is repressed, it is nevertheless still present and has periodically to be mastered in the conflicts of sibling rivalry. This struggle, like the exercise of learning to walk, strengthens the structural side of the psyche so that it widely dynamic pillar is tamed and then controlled. Such a capacity is very useful in developing resiliency in later life. It might, for example, stop a person from behaving in an infantile way when that way may thwart in love or through professional rivalry. It also helps the person to contain the super ego idea, which is sometimes quite irrational, especially during periods of crisis when collective views oppose individual development, as when a man has to choose between social custom and what conscience says is correct. In other words, it's stress upon someone who, say, begins to, in my own life, I guess we say, simply begin to have a choice of simply is no longer agreeing with what the church teaches anymore. Okay, that's what this is about here in some ways, because I'm not going to participate in that anymore. Okay, and part of my enlightenment in that way began when I was in seminary and I began to see things that didn't fit. I didn't have it yet clear until recently, but it's very clear now. And so I don't participate in that particular charade. It's a complete circus. It's a lie. It's a psychological tool that's used upon people. Fear. Crisis is observed in a child's development shift from motor to sensory perception into the abstract cognition, when the old mode of operation has to be discarded and a new method acquired. This principle applies to most critical situations. The same moment of hesitancy and fear of risk and adventure occurs in the change from infancy to childhood. The first day of school leaves a deep impression on the psyche, and the way it is handled by the decided ego is crucial in forming social attitudes. Here, the expansion and imitation of the side pillars when entering a wilder world must come as a shock to the egocentric image that had been so carefully nurtured up to that time. If the narcissistic view is not dissolved and reformed to accommodate others, many crises will arise to push the person through that initiation. If this is not done at the right time, it can become quite a problem in adulthood as the psyche continually generates the same situation in order to move the development process on. Yes, it does. If you don't deal with that situation, it will continue to come up in your life. That's true. Very true. You have people who come in your life and are they test you. And what I mean by testing you simply is that they're not telling the truth or they're not being who they say they are. And so you have to begin to assert yourself and realize something's not right here instead of quote unquote blindly obeying them, you see. If such crises are not faced and overcome, then, like I said earlier, the person will remain fixed at that stage. Some individuals try to deal with it by taking on some evasive mask, like being a joker. Other people who are temperamentally, that is, on the left pillar, simply retreat into a passive mode, while those inclined to the right column will seek to avoid the problem by excessive actions. However, sooner or later, fate will organize yet another crisis to solve the difficulty, such as a love affair in which these opposites are attracted to each other as they unconsciously seek a solution. As we have seen, a person's fate is set out in the progression so that the growth in body and mind is matched, as each supports the other in the developmental process. However, besides these phases and transitional crises, there is the more subtle infrastructure noted by astrologers who have thousands of years of data to draw upon. For example, it has been observed that as well as the planetary ages and stages of life, there are periodical rhythms and their side effects. That is, the moon, for instance, generates in the body and lower psyche, especially the ego, a monthly pattern of ease, tension, and equilibrium as it moves in relation to the mind. Moon of the horoscope, that is. Thus, a person with the moon in Aries in her chart will feel full of energy when the moon is conjunct that sign, but frustrated when it is squared by the moon's passing through. Capricorn, that is, moves through Capricorn. Moreover, she will be irritable when the moon is in Cancer and perhaps a little overconfident when the moon is in Leo. When the moon is in Libra, then the tension in the ego on that day can go either way according to how the person uses the energy. These changing states of ego consciousness, that is, the moon is usually 2 days in each sign, mostly go unnoticed because they are so ephemeral. Nevertheless, they have a bearing on the moods of the psyche, for they can sometimes be the trigger to some deeper situation brought about by the longer, but more subtle rhythms of the sun and the planets. Figure 37 is talking about transits. In February 1962, the sun, moon, and 5 planets lined up in the sign of Aquarius, opposing Uranus and Leo. They were all aligned with the north and south notes of the moon. Such a powerful axis indicates to astrologers a crucial turning point in history. Within a few months, China and India, the most populous of nations, were at war, while the US and the then USSR were very close to it over Cuba. Needless to say, I should say, this and any potent transit also affects every birth chart that has a resonance element. The psyche is very susceptible to such massive celestial presence. According to astrological tradition, these cyclical patterns create every changing configuration of influence that profoundly affects the state of the psyche. For example, Mercury and Venus have short rhythms and their various inputs in relation to the other planets, and luminaries are swift and passing. The superior planets, with their much longer cycles, have deeper and more protracted effects upon the psyche. Mars, with its 2-year circuit, precipitates moments of sudden conflict as it transits and angles each sign. If one of these happens to be in the house of partnership of an individual, confrontations with friends will occur at school, when the subject is a child, and over matters of love during youth, and indeed at any point in life when Mars is in a crucial position to that person's horoscope. This is equally true of Jupiter, which has a 12-year pattern. If that planet passes through the house of partnership, an expansion in that area is to be expected, unless, as most sometimes happens, an opposing Saturn retards a relationship in a crisis of prudence versus love. This and many other planetary combinations at work in the subtle backdrop of the cosmos operate mostly through the unconscious, not only of the individual, but for all humanity that periodically has to face such crises as the Dark Ages or the Industrial Revolution. These collective crises affect millions, although most people are oblivious to this dimension, either because they are too involved in the personal level or have a reluctance to accept they are not masters of their fate. Only those who are conscious of these Zara forces can maneuver within their powerful ebb and flow, and even then it is usually only their attitude to what happens that can be altered, for even fewer can actually alter their fate. Despite their spiritual power, even Jesus and Socrates had to go through with their executions. Their triumph was that they chose to do it with grace. A crisis may be seen as both an internal and external situation, since it is the result of both factors interacting upon the person in that place and time. Such critical moments are not random. Every life builds up to every moment as fate brings old and new into fruition. Before moving on the next lesson, many individuals live as if they were the center of the universe. And indeed, in one sense, they are, for deep within their being, at the core of their unconscious, is the divine. But because most of us are unconscious, we only see the 4 worlds from a egocentric viewpoint. This, however, does not alter the fact that everything in existence is subject to the laws graphically outlined by Jacob's ladder, which places us exactly where we ought to be in order to go through our journey of self-realization. These may be periods of relaxation so that we can prepare, or episodes of tension, which builds to a breaking up or a breaking through. In between come moments of equilibrium, which allows us to perceive what is happening. When the tree of our being is momentarily in balance and the whole situation can be appreciated from the self at temporal. Such illuminating moments might last a fraction of a second or go on for some time as the active and passive factors in a situation oscillates before coming to a resolution. Many people regard easy times as good and difficult times as bad. From a development standpoint, the reverse is often true. Lack of tension and friction can generate laziness and laxity. This is seen when an empire has touched its peak, lost its vitality, and starts to decline. The same occurs when a person reaches a point in development when established patterns start to stifle creativity. Fortunately, there comes a moment in which the forces of the active pillar begins to swing the other way in order to precipitate a shift. This may apply externally by circumstances or internally by the dynamic side of the psyche. Either way, both are a mirror of the other because faith is an expression of the balance between the two pillars. Crisis of accidents and illness are the effects of the pillars and sephirah at work throughout all the worlds. So as to bring into consciousness that which needs to be done at that point is time and space. Incident of this might be a car crash that showed the person that he was not looking where he was going in more ways than one. The Yazarati organism of the psyche is watery by nature. It can, however, become too jelly-like if the process of growth leans over too much onto the side of structure. Likewise, the psyche occasionally becomes essentially fluid if the emphasis is heavily on the side of dynamic. These imbalances always precipitate their counter actions, which continually dissolve and resolve the situation. Thus, a healthy psyche is never too fixed or too free because excess in either direction will disturb the optimum balance necessary to keep within its limits. Crises that arise quite naturally in the course of events can usually be contained. The ones that cannot be are the often self-inflicted by willfulness or the result of karma. Taking a more transpersonal view, our examination now moves beyond the mechanics of the psyche to focus once more on the unconscious, but from a different level as we look at individuals who are neither neurotic nor psychotic, but have a profound sense of something missing in their lives. These people are often in crisis, but not of the usual order. They are the seekers who have been spoken of earlier, who wish to find their true selves. This is where the Carl Jung's approach comes into our study. So that's where we stop at chapter 35 today, which is called Crisis. So thank you for being here. I wish you well. I hope this just makes some sense again. Again, this is from the book called Psychology and Kabbalah. It's a good book. It's another book I plan to look into by the same author. The author itself, I should say simply, as I forgot to tell you, is the writer of Kabbalah Tradition of Hidden Knowledge, which is right here. This is a Thames and Hudson publishing book, which they do quite often. They usually have oversized books. This guy is, I'd never heard of him until Phil Langdon shared him with me. His name is Zeb Ben Shimon Levi, and it's simply called Kabbalah Tradition of Hidden Knowledge. And so we hopefully will do a broadcast Thursday dealing with what I would call with the Kabbalah and the tarot cards. There are 22 paths. Each color in this tarot card is symbolically sharing something deeper. Each symbol here is very important too. So we'll see if this works out with Phil on Thursday evening. I'm sorry, not Thursday evening, Thursday morning time for me, and will be afternoon time for England. So it'll be like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My time on the Eastern Coast would be 9 o'clock. So we hope we go through that. Hopefully we don't have any issues with the internet. We've had sometimes some issues with that. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. Again, the book is simply called Psychology and Kabbalah. Thank you. You have a good day. That's chapter 35 called Crisis.